This is an unprecedented symptom. The attending doctor isn't here. Who's going to do the surgery? I can't do it. The doctors stood before the stretcher being wheeled into the operating room, holding their heads in despair. The person who collapsed is my mentor. I somehow managed to get him to the hospital, but his condition is so severe that no one wants to perform the surgery. If that's the case, I'll do it. I made up my mind and stepped forward. What are you saying? You're not even a doctor. There's no way you can save my father. His daughter looked at me with disbelief. And I can't blame her. After all, I'm just a part-timer at a diner. Don't worry, I'll definitely save Mitchell. I flashed a reassuring smile and rushed toward the operating room. Because I am. My name is Samuel, 29 years old. I work part-time at a diner. About a year ago, I was hired as a temporary worker because Mitchell, the owner of the diner, had been feeling unwell. Phew! I somehow made it through today's lunch rush. The diner is sandwiched between a residential area and an office district, and with the nearby university hospital, it gets packed during lunchtime. Mitchell, his wife, their daughter, and I managed to keep things running with just the four of us. I handed Mitchell a towel as he wiped the sweat from his brow and told him to take a break while I washed the dishes and cooking utensils. For the past few days, Mitchell hadn't been able to work out front, staying in the back doing support tasks. Standing for long periods made him short of breath quickly. Thanks again, Samuel. You've really been a huge help lately. No, I'm the one who should be grateful you hired me. Honestly, Dad is way too soft on you. The woman handing Mitchell a glass of water and giving me a cold look was Nicole. She's Mitchell's only daughter. With plans to eventually take over the diner, she's studying business management in college, while also working toward her culinary license and helping out at the diner. To everyone, she's the perfect daughter, always kind to the customers. In other words, she's the face of the diner. But for some reason, she's often cold toward me. If you slack off just because you're a part-timer, I'll have you out of here in no time. Despite her harsh words, I couldn't help but admire the way she swiftly dried the dishes and returned them to the shelves. That's not my intention at all. Nicole just wants you to become a full-time employee. She thinks as a part-timer, you might leave any day now. She'd be sad if you left, Dad. That's not it at all. A plate slipped from Nicole's hands. I reached out and caught it just in time. Here you go. Oh, thanks. She's not a bad person, she even thanked me properly. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, we can't trust someone who might quit at any moment. The four of us are barely keeping this place running. If you suddenly left, we'd be in big trouble. Yeah, I get it. It's an important place. As long as you understand. Watching us, Mitchell smiled as he sipped his water. Just then, he let out a violent cough. Nicole and I rushed to his side, patting him on the back. Are you okay, Dad? Did something go down the wrong pipe? Yeah. I guess I'm just getting old. What are you talking about? As I listened to the father-daughter conversation, I touched Mitchell's throat. Samuel, what's up? Mitchell, can you open your mouth for a moment? Huh? Sure. Excuse me for a second. I apologized and used the light from my phone to check inside his mouth. I couldn't get a detailed look, but I had a bad feeling, so I leaned closer and pressed my ear to his chest, listening to his breathing. Mitchell, which hospital have you been going to? The one by the station. I see. You know, it might be a good idea to get checked out at a larger hospital. If you talk to your current doctor, I'm sure they'll give you a referral. If possible, try to see Dr. Yates, he's a top-notch surgeon. Ah, got it. Mitchell jotted down my advice without hesitation. Nicole, observing the whole thing, looked at me with curiosity. Who are you, Samuel? Now that I think about it, you've never told me what you did before. Well, I just happen to know some people in that field. Anyway, make sure to go with Mitchell to the hospital. Of course, I will. A few days later, Mitchell was back in the kitchen for the first time in a while. After visiting the university hospital and seeing Dr. Yates, thanks to my referral, Mitchell had started feeling better at an impressive rate. The customers were happily chatting with him, delighted to see him again after such a long absence. Mitchell, you're looking good today. Yeah, it's all thanks to your advice, Samuel. I should have spoken up sooner. Not at all. If you hadn't said anything, I wouldn't be here with our customers today. Isn't it Dr. Yates you should be thanking? You're giving Samuel too much credit, Dad. Nicole coolly continued plating the dishes. Of course, I'm grateful to Dr. Yates, but if it weren't for Samuel, I wouldn't have even seen him. But still. Nicole, if you keep prepping with that kind of expression, the food's going to taste bad. She glanced down at her hands, startled. I'm not a chef, but I've heard that food made with care tastes different than food that isn't. Whether it's a superstition or a belief, that doesn't really matter. What's important is the care you put into the food and your customers. Sorry. She apologized sincerely, then took the finished dish to the customer, looking a bit down. A regular seemed to notice and asked her something with a concerned expression. Sorry about that, Samuel. She really is a good kid, but... Of course, I understand. She's just a bit hard to read sometimes. Exactly. When she said she'd take over the diner, she told me and her mother we weren't reliable enough. But then I heard from one of her friends that deep down, she really wanted us to focus more on ourselves than the business. She's really an amazing daughter. Isn't she, though? We shared a laugh and continued through the lunch rush that day. Even though Mitchell was doing better, overworking wasn't an option. Once the customers cleared out, I set up a chair for him to take a break, but just as he sat down, the door opened again, and two men walked in. Welcome. Mitchell stood right back up. Having customers is great, but I really want Mitchell to get as much rest as possible. I stepped forward to greet the guests. Welcome. A table for two. Yes, just the two of us. As the young man held up two fingers, I noticed a familiar face behind him. Well, if it isn't Samuel. I never thought I'd run into you here, in such a rundown place. It's been a while. The man recognized me too, and after a brief look of surprise, his face twisted into a smug, unpleasant smile. So this is where you ended up. I wondered why I hadn't seen you lately. Looks like our business practices didn't suit you. People who can't adapt to the company culture will fail no matter where they go. I still think your methods are wrong. Still going on about that? Haven't you heard the saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do? If you just followed my lead, you could have been successful. But I guess that was too hard for someone young like you to grasp, wasn't it? He glanced around the diner, laughing. You chose to work in a place like this. Maybe you're just too dumb to make proper decisions. Ha! A voice full of anger came from the back of the diner. It was Nicole. The man's companion stepped in to mediate. Kyle, that's enough. Please, have a seat. Ha! Not that I expect much. The man, apparently named Kyle, reluctantly sat down, clearly displeased. You can handle the order, Henry. I only came here because you insisted. Otherwise, who in their right mind would come to a place that reeks of mildew? The young man's name seemed to be Henry. As he opened the menu, he glanced nervously toward the kitchen, clearly flustered. I understand, but they can hear you. I'm saying it so they can hear. Ah. Okay, we'll have the daily special and a mackerel miso set for him, please. Understood. When I returned to the kitchen, Mitchell was chuckling as he started preparing the orders, while Nicole was glaring daggers at the table. If that other guy hadn't been decent, I would have thrown them out. Nicole muttered as she passed by me, clearly irritated. Do you know that rude guy, Samuel? Well, from back in the day, yeah. I dodged the question and distanced myself by helping with the meal prep. I had a feeling she'd ask more about it later, and the thought weighed heavily on me. I quietly apologized to Mitchell. It's not your fault, Samuel, so no need to apologize. Mitchell said with a smile that made me feel even more indebted to him. See? It's good, right? It's no different from what I'd eat at home. Nicole clenched her fists. I discreetly blocked her from leaving the kitchen, just in case. About 30 minutes later, Kyle and Henry stood up, and Mitchell headed to the register. I was about to go, but Mitchell stopped me, and he signaled to Nicole to stay back as well. If they pick a fight on their way out, it'll be more trouble than it's worth. Okay. Nicole, seemingly aware of the truth in that statement, backed down quietly. I didn't want to get involved with them either, so I stayed back and watched from a distance as Mitchell handled the payment. Let's see, your total is Suddenly, Mitchell clutched his chest and began coughing violently. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion, even though it only took a second. With a loud thud, Mitchell collapsed in front of the register. We all stood there, stunned. Dad! Nicole's hollow voice snapped me back to reality. Mitchell! I quickly laid Mitchell on his back and checked for consciousness. He was unresponsive, his face pale. Not only did he not answer my calls, but his breathing had completely stopped. A heart attack. Without knowing his exact condition, I couldn't risk doing anything reckless. I sent Nicole to call an ambulance, secured Mitchell's airway, and started performing CPR. Kyle, check his pulse. Henry, clear a path for the ambulance. Henry immediately followed my instructions and rushed out. But Kyle, watching Mitchell's condition, shook his head. Looking at him, it's no use. There's nothing we can do. He's important to me. Even if he wasn't, it's a doctor's duty to save people, no matter who they are. I threw those words at him, continuing CPR. Not long after, the sound of sirens approached from the distance. As Mitchell was loaded onto a stretcher, Nicole and I climbed into the ambulance with him. While the paramedics fitted him with a respirator, one of them glanced at me, clearly surprised. Samuel, what are you doing here? Focus on him for now. Nicole, please explain Mitchell's medical history. Right. Nicole pulled out notes from Mitchell's past doctor visits and listed the medications he'd been taking. Given the short amount of time, it was impressive how she managed to gather everything from their home. He was doing well today. It might be some kind of attack. Is his primary doctor Dr. Yates? He's out of the country for a conference this week. Where are we headed? I asked, and the paramedics looked to me with expectant eyes. University Hospital. It was the same hospital where Mitchell had been receiving treatment, the one I'd recommended. When we arrived, Mitchell was immediately rushed to the operating room on a stretcher. We were left waiting near the operating room, and before long, a doctor came running toward us. Nearly stumbling over himself, he reached me, panting heavily. "We've completed the preliminary tests. What's his condition?" "It seems to be complications from his underlying condition. It's extremely critical. He's still not breathing, and there's no pulse." "Who's performing the surgery?" "Well, the symptoms are unprecedented, and..." "So what? How many doctors do you have here?" Every second was precious, yet the doctor hesitated, fumbling for words. "Are you telling me there's no doctor here confident enough to take this on?" "That's absurd. There's no time for this." I knew there was no point in yelling. But the incompetence of the hospital left me on the verge of losing it, overwhelmed by frustration and anger. I couldn't leave Mitchell's life in their hands. "I'll do it." "What? I'm qualified. There shouldn't be a problem." "What are you saying?" Nicole, who had been trembling in silence since we arrived, looked at me in disbelief. "Are you out of your mind? You're not a doctor. There's no way you can save my father." "Don't worry. I'll save him, I promise." I held Nicole's hands tightly, looking her straight in the eyes, and made a promise. "Okay." Pressed by the intensity of my resolve, Nicole nodded. Leaving her there, I rushed into the operating room. 2 hours later, after doing everything I could, I stood over Mitchell as he slept. "Dad!" Nicole collapsed at the bedside, crying beside Mitchell. "Honey!" Mitchell's wife, who had been away on an errand that day, arrived, led in by a nurse. She stood next to Nicole, taking Mitchell's hand in hers. "Samuel, you saved him." "Well, yes." As I gave a small nod, she bowed deeply. "Thank you so much for saving him. It's what any doctor would have done." The surgery was a success. As the tension finally released from my body, I sank into a nearby chair. "Impressive work, Samuel." One of the younger surgeons handed me a towel, offering a respectful nod. Other doctors from the same department stood just outside the room, whispering, "Samuel really pulled through again," in hushed tones. "You were the only one who didn't give up," the younger doctor murmured. I playfully knocked on his forehead. "Listen, no matter how difficult the surgery, as long as there's even a 1% chance, you can't just give up." "I'm only glad I was here." "Were you scared?" "Sorry." The younger doctor left the room with his head bowed. The other doctors, likely fearing they might be the next to get scolded, quietly dispersed from outside the room. Letting out a sigh of frustration, thinking, "This is exactly why I never wanted to return to the hospital," Nicole lifted her tear-streaked face and looked at me. "Samuel, who are you?" "Well, no, I think I know now." "You're a doctor here, aren't you?" "Yeah, more or less." "Why were you working part-time at our diner?" "You saw it yourself." "I got tired of how things were here. I used to be the top surgeon at this hospital, known as the lead in the department. I had nicknames like the Hand of God and Genius Surgeon, which felt a little embarrassing. But my success rate in difficult surgeries was so high that patients came from overseas just to have me operate on them. Things started to go downhill about a year ago, when Kyle was appointed as a professor and took over as head of surgery. Once Kyle became the top figure in the department, the culture began to change. Under his leadership, many doctors prioritized wealthy patients, offering them faster and better care. Discriminating against patients based on money should never happen. Yet under Kyle's orders, those swayed by greed began treating wealthier patients preferentially. Not only that, Kyle started taking my well-off patients and making himself their primary doctor. If it meant the patients would get better, I had no problem with him taking over. But when it came time for surgery, he'd assign me as his assistant. He would then leave all the difficult procedures to me and take credit for the entire operation. Kyle lied to the patients, making them believe he performed the surgeries, earning their trust and gratitude. I thought about telling the patients the truth, but the doctor-patient relationship is built on trust. Even a small lie could damage that bond and cause unnecessary stress for the patients. I didn't want to risk putting my important patients in danger just to protect my own reputation. As long as they recovered, that was all that mattered. I kept telling myself that to endure it, but when a surgery didn't go well, Kyle would shift the blame onto me. No one dared to go against Kyle, and everyone turned a blind eye. Medicine is supposed to be a team effort. But how can you trust your colleagues when things are like this? There was no trust between any of us. If something went wrong, it was all blamed on me. The feelings of distrust and frustration swirled in my head, and gradually, I became afraid of performing surgeries. It was Mitchell who noticed and cared for me during that dark time. He ran the diner I frequented during my lunch breaks, and it seems he had noticed how tired and worn out I was becoming. One day, when the diner was quiet and no other customers were around, he brought me a dessert I hadn't ordered. "Since you're a regular, this one's on us. Plus, if you've got any complaints to get off your chest, I'm all ears." That's when I finally opened up to him, the man who had been nothing more than a diner owner to me. "I see. That's rough. No wonder going to work feels like a burden." "Yeah. If you figured out what's stressing you out, maybe it's best to take a step back for a while. Why don't you take a break?" "But doing nothing would just make it worse." "In that case, why don't you help out at the diner?" "Help out? Here?" "Yeah. I'm getting older, and it's been harder to keep up. I've been going to the hospital more often, too. My daughter's going to start helping out next month, but she's not really suited for the heavy lifting." "Are you sure it's okay?" "I should be the one asking you that," Mitchell said, flashing his trademark grin. I decided to take him up on his offer, taking a break from my medical career to work part-time at the diner. It gave me the space I needed to escape those dark, stressful days. So that's how I ended up here, and I owe Mitchell more than I can say. He helped me find myself again. I didn't know that. Nicole listened to my story without a hint of doubt in her eyes. "It happened a month before you started helping out. I didn't know any of that, and I've said such terrible things. I'm so sorry. And thank you for saving my dad." Nicole bowed her head deeply. The usually energetic girl now seemed fragile, whether from emotional exhaustion or simply struggling to process everything that had happened. "No, I asked Mitchell not to tell you. Whether I'm a doctor or not has nothing to do with my work at the diner. And honestly, I don't remember you saying anything all that terrible." "No. I was being mean. I know I was hard on you." "Well, I figured you were just having a hard time being straightforward. So, you're saying that all my self-loathing afterward was pointless? Wait, you were feeling like that?" She turned red and ignored me. A week later, Mitchell was discharged from the hospital. Although he would need more frequent checkups, he seemed relieved that I was now his primary doctor. Yes, I returned to my role as a surgeon at S University Hospital. Successfully performing Mitchell's surgery restored my confidence in facing patients once again.
The diner remained closed until Mitchell's health stabilized, but he, Nicole, and his wife spent their time productively, coming up with new menu ideas. Dr. Yates, Mitchell's original primary doctor, was shocked by everything that had happened in his absence but praised me for what I had done to address the fear that had gripped some of the other doctors. Dr. Yates also initiated regular study sessions, which were more like lectures aimed at preventing such hesitation in the future. As one of the lecturers, I was also called upon to stand at the podium. The hospital requested my help in restoring its reputation by demonstrating my skills and commitment as a doctor to those around me. Dr. Yates personally apologized for being absent during Mitchell's crisis and thanked me. I decided to confide in him about the reasons behind my temporary break from surgery. He took the lead in conducting an internal investigation within the hospital. As a result, Kyle and several other doctors who had been showing favoritism toward wealthier patients were exposed. The situation didn't stay internal, though. For the past few days, the hospital director and the administration had been busy explaining things to the media. What really sealed Kyle's fate was the public outcry on social media. Apparently, when Mitchell collapsed at the diner, the door had been left open, and a small crowd of onlookers gathered outside. While not exactly commendable, one person had filmed the entire incident and posted it online, with the caption, "A competent server and an incompetent doctor," dripping with sarcasm. Of course, the video was quickly deleted, but its reach had already been immense. By that same evening, Kyle's name and the hospital where he worked had been identified. He had plastered his face all over the top of the hospital's homepage, which ironically backfired on him. While I watched it unfold almost as if it were someone else's problem, he was reprimanded by the hospital director. The loss of trust in the hospital, combined with the timing of my report, exposed his misdeeds. He was fired for violating employment regulations and for his incompetence as a doctor. He is currently searching for a new job, but naturally, no hospital, or any place for that matter, wants to hire someone whose face is now recognized not just in the medical field, but by the public as well. Every now and then, I hear from fellow doctors at other hospitals that he was turned away again. With he and other self-serving doctors gone, the hospital has finally become a place where patients can receive equal treatment. Now, I'm able to focus on my patients and lead fulfilling days as a doctor. After I left the diner, they started offering a bento service, thanks to Nicole's suggestion to reduce Mitchell's time spent in the kitchen. It was her way of lightening the load on her father. Today's, ginger pork bento looks delicious. Of course it is. My dad made it. Nicole said proudly as I peeked into the lunchbox she handed me outside the hospital. She had been delivering these bentos to me every day as a way of thanking me for saving her father. Every single day. Oh, is that a homemade lunch? Lucky guy. Henry, one of the hospital's younger doctors, happened to spot us and whistled teasingly. He had started working as a resident while I was on leave, so he knew little about me or Kyle's downfall. He was still fresh to the medical world. He was also a regular at the diner and recognized Nicole well. "It's not like that. It's my dad's cooking," Nicole quickly defended, flustered. "Lucky for you either way. Samuel, let's hit the diner together next week." "Sounds good." "Wait, you're coming? Is that a problem?" "I never said that." As usual, Nicole's attitude toward me was strict. But this time, she surprised me. "By the way, I know you're a great doctor now, but if anything like this ever happens again,
You're always welcome to come work at the diner. Could it be that I now had another place where I belonged? Thanks, Nicole. You're really kind, you know? Me? Yeah. You're a good daughter, you work hard for the diner, and you've been bringing me these bentos. That's just because you saved my dad. It's not like I'm doing this because I want to. Oh? Then you don't have to push yourself. Who said I'm being forced? Watching Nicole's stubborn reaction, I remembered something Mitchell had told me during his recent checkup. Nicole's been a little down since you left the diner, but ever since she started delivering those bentos, she's been humming to herself. She must really like you. Mitchell had said with a chuckle, glad that his daughter seemed to have found someone special. What? As Nicole mounted her bike to head back to the diner, I decided to offer some advice, even though I knew it wasn't my place. You know, if you were a bit more honest with yourself, you'd come across as an even more charming woman. What? Mind your own business. And what do you mean even more? Don't get cocky with me. Her voice cracked as she wobbled on her bike and pedaled away. I called out, "Be careful," though I wasn't sure if she heard me. Trust that had been broken doesn't recover easily, but I now have allies by my side. For a while, I had feared surgery, but I've been reminded that there are lives I can save with my own hands. And now, I have more places where I belong. There are people I can trust. As long as they're with me, I can keep going. What once felt like a narrow field of view is opening up. I want to face my work and my patients with honesty and the courage to believe in myself again. I believe that by doing this, it's my way of repaying everyone for their kindness.